Hello IB students, we're in paper 2 and whatever question you pick in paper 2, you're going to be starting with a couple of 2-mark questions. Following that, you'll have another 2-marker and a 3-mark question. Let's make sure you're okay with all of those different question styles, starting with those couple of 2-mark questions right at the start. These questions are normally definitions, just define something, but equally, it might not be. It might be state a couple of things or list a couple of things. Now, if it says state or list, you just do exactly that, right? So if it says, I'm going to state 2 different types of protectionism, just state them in and you move on. But normally they are definitions questions. You've got to make sure that you know your definitions inside out. And literally those definitions could be of anything in the course. There are some classic ones like defining economic growth, defining development, defining interest rate or inflation. You know, your bog standard key terms in economics, but IB could go very specific, very kind of narrow in the definitions. You've got to make sure, first of all, you know all your definitions for paper 2. You're revising your definitions very well. And knowing your definitions is not just great for these questions, it's even good for your essays. It's good for just your own knowledge. It gives you kind of a starting point in understanding key economic theory. So make sure you are revising your definitions. When you're answering these 2-marker definition questions, remember, they are marked in levels. So to get level 2, i.e. 2 marks out of 2, you've got to make sure your definition is full, it's accurate, everything you can possibly say, you're saying. Now to help you, to make sure you don't get level 1, which is only 1 out of 2, you want to get level 2, 2 out of 2. I always think, look for 2 parts in your definition. If there are 2 clear parts in your definition, well, that could be your 2 marks. So for example, define an interest rate. We know an interest rate is the cost of borrowing money, but it's also the return on saving money, right? 2 clear parts of that definition. So if definitions have 2 clear parts, you can think, well, writing those 2 parts down should be my 2 marks. But some definitions don't, like if you're defining a variable cost or something. So in addition, what you might think is really useful to do is giving an example. That would be fantastic, absolutely fantastic. Or for some definitions, like if you're defining price elasticity of demand, you might want to give a calculation. So my point is, look for 2 distinct parts of the definition, but then always look for an example or look for a calculation if relevant. That way, you're banking the 2 marks guaranteed. So remember, it's marked in levels. In that sense, whatever you're writing, make sure it's fully accurate, but be quick. Don't waste time on these 2 markers at the start. Get them done. Make sure you're revising so that these are very, very easy questions. Now, let's move to the other 2 marker that follows and the 3 marker that follows. These are also gifts, guys. You should be looking at full marks here as well as full marks on those first couple of 2 markers. Right, these 2 marker and 3 mark questions could be either draw a diagram or calculate. So it could be draw a diagram for 2 marks or draw a diagram for 3 marks, or it could be calculate for 2 marks or calculate for 3 marks, right? So the 2 and the 3 could be either of these 2 things, but you know, one of them is going to be draw a diagram, one of them is going to be calculate. Now, it doesn't matter the number of marks that you see, it's always the same thing you're looking to do to get 2 marks or 3 marks. So if it says draw a diagram, often you won't see any explanation needed. It will literally just say draw a diagram, in which case you've got to make sure your diagram is properly accurate. If you're drawing a shift, make sure you're shifting the right curve and it's going the right way. And make sure it's fully labeled, right? So axis, get that label correctly. Price, quantity in micro, price level, and real GDP in macro, whatever. Make sure it's fully labeled on the axis. Make sure your curves are fully labeled. Make sure your equilibria are fully labeled as well. And if the diagram is making you show something unique, like maybe the intervention buying when it comes to minimum pricing or consumer surplus or whatever, make sure you've labeled that as well. That should be a walk in the park. So if that's the 2 marker or the 3 marker, you should be getting full marks, no problem. But the other kind of question, if it's calculate for 2 marks or calculate for 3 marks, again, it should be relatively simple. The key thing on this is don't think you're a hero. Show all your working. Don't just dive straight to the answer and just write that down. Show your full working, your full process. So if there was an equation, put the equation down, then put the numbers into that equation, and then give your answer. Okay, nice technique there. And make sure your answer, you are writing the unit. So if it's a percentage or a percentage change, or if it's in dollars or whatever currency, make sure that's down. If it's kilograms, make sure all the units are there. Watch out for the scale, right? So often the question will scale things to maybe hundreds of thousands to millions or billions. Make sure you remember that and your answer is correct according to the scale. And always 2 decimal places if the answer is not exact. you're looking for 2 DP. If the answer is a whole number or to 1 decimal place nicely, then fine. But if it's a longer answer, always 2 decimal places, otherwise you lose a mark straight away. So that's how you get full marks on the couple of 2 markers at the start, and then the 2 and the 3 marker that follows. These are gifts, guys. Very simple questions. You should be aiming for full marks. Just remember all this and you'll be absolutely set. Let's move on now to the 4 markers that follow, shall we?